morning, everybody. We're starting a little bit late, so I'm going to run through some things fairly quickly. I'm calling the meeting of the Strategic Initiatives and Planning Committee to order. And can I please confirm that we have a quorum?
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're expected to adjourn at 11:45. I will do my best to get us there. The live stream of the public meeting is available on the youtube.com at ABOR Live link. And our first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our prior meeting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Seeing none, I'm going to move that the committee approve the public session minutes from the September 14th, 2023 Strategic Initiatives and Planning Committee meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does carry. Item number 2 is a brief update on the mission differentiation that we discussed at the last meeting. We did update the board briefly in Flagstaff regarding some of the activities taking place toward further differentiation in the universities. And this morning, I would like to ask President Cruz Rivera and Regent Penley to spend a moment updating the committee on NAU's differentiation efforts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. As you all know, NAU has been embarking in a mission differentiation effort for the last 2 years, since the beginning of the 17th presidency. It was a direct mandate from the board that we do so. And not too long ago, at the State of the University address that we delivered in Flagstaff, we talked a little bit about how we have, in the last couple of years, address some issues of morale on our campus, our financial health, and of course the mission. When we talked about the mission, we started from the standpoint of our NAU 2025 Elevating Excellence Strategic Roadmap, which in and of itself presents a path towards a differentiated approach to higher ed here in the state of Arizona, with 3 components. One around access, one around economic mobility, and one around social impact. We have discussed this throughout the last couple of years, so I won't spend too much time, and we gave the highlights at the State of the University, but just very quickly in terms of access, we have seen how the support of the board in advancing new admissions policies has really allowed us to broaden participation and reach this year a record year in terms of the largest incoming class ever to NAU, a class that, among other characteristics, is the most Arizonan in our history. About 73% are from in-state, 50% of whom qualified for the Access to Excellence scholarship. And through the various efforts that we put in place, with your support, we saw an increase of 47% in our indigenous student population from last year, taking us to the largest number ever of Native American students enrolled at NAU. Through our A++ Arizona Attainment Alliance process and the admissions pilot that you all supported, we have been able to receive funding from the Helios Foundation as well as the Lumina Foundation to put in place some very innovative admissions processes, especially around transfer from community colleges to NAU. And so we're seeing the results of that. In terms of mobility and educational attainment, we are very happy that this year we were elevated to Tier 1 of the Third Way Mobility Index, Economic Mobility Index in the U.S., demonstrating the value of an NAU degree. And we have put in place several initiatives within our campus that are aimed at ensuring that we're not only broadening participation and expanding access into NAU, but that we are actually supporting our students through graduation and positioning them well for careers of consequence and lives of purpose. And to that end, we have an academic momentum initiative on campus right now that is aimed squarely at increasing first-year retention rates and graduation rates over the next 3 to 6 years. We are well ahead of our plans around 100% career readiness for each and every one of our academic programs. We are reshaping our academic portfolio to ensure that we have a broader density of high demand, high skill, high wage jobs based on information from the Arizona Commerce Authority. And of course, among many other things, we are tailoring our academic programs and exploring ways in which we can deploy our assets to meet the needs of Arizona head-on, especially as it respects to healthcare, as well as having a broader footprint with a differentiated value proposition of college networks across the state. So we feel very good about how we have, in the past 2 years, shifted away from a trajectory that was privileging research to one that privileges access and attainment. Now, having said that, you all will remember that when we were having this conversation around research versus teaching, I mentioned that the university had no objection to becoming an R1 institution, that we were just simply not going to overinvest in trying to gain that designation at the expense of the student services and student support work that we wanted to do. Well, it turns out that in the last 2 years we have increased, even though we have switched directions. Our teacher scholars have increased our research expenditures from 50 to 70 million in 2 years. And we're producing about 85 doctoral students a year. And that is important because just yesterday, the Carnegie classification system announced that they were making changes to how they designate R1 institutions starting in 2025. And so based on our numbers and our projections, in 2025, Arizona will have 3 R1 institutions because NAU will make the cut. And more importantly, there are only 20 HSIs across the country out of about 400 that are both HSIs and R1s. And in 2025, all 3 of Arizona's public universities will be HSIs and R1s. So, as I said to Chair Duval in communicating this, it looks like NAU is being able to keep its cake or whatever and eat it too. So we're feeling good. And with your continued support, we will be able to continue to advance this differentiated mission. I do know that we have a request around particularly our footprint in the state, and I'll turn it over to Regent Penley.
Thank you very much, President Cruz-Rivera. I just appreciate the many things that you've said about where NAU is heading, and let me just begin by saying that, including the focused kind of research that has led to the increase that you've talked about. I've long known NAU as really excellent in virology and bacteriology, and the grants from NIH in that area have no doubt contributed to that. I've also always known about the extraordinary focus on environmental science and forestry that I know is also supported by research grants that have really pushed the university forward. So that focused area of very, very high quality in the research, I think, is to be admired in Northern Arizona University. I appreciate very much the opportunity to work with President Cruz-Rivera, specifically on his statewide outreach, which is one of the at-risk goals that he has this year. And I believe that we will be able to make significant progress on that and be able to update the board in the future, both he and I, on where we're headed there. The fact that President Cruz-Rivera has focused NAU on the kind of access mission that he described a moment ago, and career success, career outcomes. Almost all young people these days, and certainly their parents, at least as a parent, I'll speak that way, we want children to go to college and be a success and have very great outcomes. The fact that President Cruz-Rivera has emphasized that so directly will certainly enable us in addressing how we increase the statewide mission and statewide responsibility of NAU in doing so for the success of those young people, and not so young, who choose to get a degree from NAU. So more later as we make some progress on these initiatives.
Perfect. Thank you, Regent Penley.
Thank you.
And President Cruz Rivera. Are there any questions or comments from the board for either President Cruz Rivera or Regent Penley? Okay. I appreciate you all. This really is right in line with what we had hoped NAU would do. And I think I can speak for certainly most of the board, and that I think the speed with which this is coming together is probably more than we could have hoped for. So thank you all very much. Our next item on the agenda is a request to provide a Regents Opportunity Grant funding to NAU. This funding is intended to go towards support of NAU's differentiation efforts that we just talked about, and the board's at-risk assignment for President Cruz Rivera to collaborate with ABOR to produce a multi-year strategic and operational plan to develop an innovative and highly differentiated network of colleges that expands access to academic excellence across the state. President Cruz Rivera, I know that your team has worked closely with Regent Penley and board staff on this project, and can you give the committee some insight on how this Regents Opportunity Grant is needed to successfully complete this project?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to share with the board that we have developed a very aggressive plan for the remainder of this year that will lead to a very detailed report to the board on the feasibility and the considerations and the design options that would be available to this board to consider in terms of expanding the ecosystem, the options within the educational ecosystem in Arizona. We have been very fortunate to have a team of NAU working closely with a team from ABOR and in close collaboration with Regent Penley. And the funding that we are requesting is basically to allow us to, in short order, deliver on the at-risk goal requirements. Specifically, the funding would allow us to do an assessment of the Arizona higher ed marketplace and the gaps that currently exist. It will allow us to design differentiated structural missions, concepts, and delivery options for this network. It will allow us to also delineate some funding and advocacy strategies for advancing attainment-focused offers in the marketplace, and to design specifications for the deployment of this new entity. Of course, all of this is predicated on leveraging the existing assets that we have developed with the Arizona Attainment Alliance, so our community college partners, as well as the over 20 sites we already have statewide, and the reformulation or reconceptualization of our online offerings, as we have discussed in recent meetings. The project is fairly far along. The amount of funding that is being required matches very well what we are with respect to engaging with marketing, design, branding, and demographic firms. The approach would be NAU would be fronting the funding to get this work done. And if the board were to approve this grant, we would be reimbursed in the back end. I'll turn it over to Regent Penley.
Thank you, President Cruz Rivera. I would just urge this committee to recommend to the board approval on this particular issue. We have assigned President Cruz Rivera goal number 2 that really addresses this outreach to the state. As those of you, including Regent Herbold, who knows this area better than I, or probably anyone at the table knows, we need expertise to do the kind of successful market research and demographic research that really will allow us to make good design decisions down the road as a board in conjunction with President Cruz Rivera to really be successful. We understand as well that individuals like Regent Pacheco, Regent Herbold, Regent Goodyear, and perhaps others on the board have special expertise in this area. We anticipate, of course, that we will call on you for your advice, your counsel, and your wisdom and experience to really assure that we make good judgments, both in how we design the market research, as well as in how we interpret the research the research results. So I urge that the committee recommend this to the full board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Can you tell me what the timeline is for, I mean, have you already engaged the consultants? And kind of when should we expect to see first cuts of data?
Sure, we can certainly share the sort of the top levels of the Gantt chart. It's sort of a cascading process. The market research will start this week, basically. We are finalizing a statement of work for the firm that would start helping us think about the design of the college network. And then we have the branding specialists, and finally the demographers. So everything is structured in kind of a sequential way with some checkpoints along the way to make sure that we're navigating the design space in the right direction. But in the end, we expect that in January, we could present the board with a really good snapshot of where we are. There would still be questions to be addressed through the rest of the semester. And perhaps it would be worthwhile to have an off-cycle ROA where we could, anybody that's interested could really jump in and see where we are. Don't know if Regent Penley has other comments.
Well, as President Chris Rivera has said, we're planning to use some marketing research firms that this board is familiar with, that it has received good results from in the past. We know that we're going to have to work carefully with our consultant to design the market research successfully, and that effort has not been engaged in yet. So there's going to be plenty of time for those of us who know something about market research to be involved in assuring that the consultant delivers to us the kind of information that we're going to need to make good judgments about the design and the branding subsequently. So we're at a very early stage here, and one which is going to give us a chance to weigh in.
Perfect. Just one other quick question. So the demographer was kind of the last in line, and I'm curious about that because it would seem to me that that would be kind of a front-end driver of the whole conversation.
If I may speak on that, I have, in my conversations with some of President Cruz Rivera's team, I have urged them, Regent Manson, to put demography a little earlier in this and a lot earlier, because I think we can do certain things. And I'll go back to President Cruz Rivera's Gantt chart. Nothing stops us from looking. The demography is not going to change that much in 6 or 12 months. That doing it earlier isn't going to serve us perfectly well. So while he used language to talk about that at the close of his comments, we've already discussed how we address that a little earlier, to your very point, Regent Manson.
Perfect, thank you.
And one last thing I would add is that the way the sequencing is structured is that there will be checkpoints along the way. It may very well be that after marketing study, there's nothing else to do. Right, and so we would bring that to the board and say, perhaps it's not the right time, or after the branding, or so we will certainly keep the board apprised and be very judicious in how we expend these monies.
Perfect, thank you. All right.
A question.
Yes.
This may be naive, but my perception is that the community colleges have really suffered over the last 10 years. And when you read about a program such as the one you're pursuing, you can't help but say, how do you overcome that if it's true? Why did they have such a difficult time? And what are we going to do about that if we want to make such a extended effort here successful?
Well, there are many reasons why, not only in Arizona, but across the country, community college enrollments have been going down. What we're focused is less on what has transpired and more on where the opportunities are. So we're seeing that, for example, our universal admissions program, which is the one where students are applying to NAU, but rather than receiving a letter of rejection, they are being admitted at a community college. with the guarantee of being able to enroll later at NAU, has had phenomenal results in the pilot year for Coconino Community College. They have the largest ever increase year over year in enrollment thanks to that program. And we are in the process now, perhaps with the aid of some philanthropic support that I can't yet name, to expand that to 8 other community college districts. So that's one way in which students that perhaps may not have been applying to the community colleges, getting a letter of rejection from one of the 4-year institutions and stopping there, that we're re-engaging them in the process. We're also looking at the hundreds of thousands of adults in Arizona with some college but no degree that have not really been engaged in a way that would really encourage them to return to the university. With the help of a Lumina grant called Jacks on Track, we've seen fantastic return on investment on that effort, especially when we combine it, as we are with the community colleges, where we're not only reaching out to somebody who left college with 90 credits and had perhaps transferred to NAU from another community college and saying, hey, come here and finish your last 30 credits with us. We're saying to them, you already earned an associate's degree and you didn't know it, so we're going to send it to you because you have 90 credits. We're reverse transferring to your community college. And oh, by the way, we have these ways of ensuring that you can graduate.
But what did they do wrong over that 10-year period or so?
Well, some of the general high-level things that have occurred, at the time, a strong labor market led many students who would normally have gone to community colleges to not enroll in community colleges. We also saw an increase in a time lag in the ability of community colleges to reshape their curriculum so that it would lead to good paying jobs.
But is it possible that it was the fact that there wasn't a dream to follow after they complete the 2 years, that it was just community college, that they didn't have?
Well,
because what you're suggesting with the experiments you're doing is that holding out a 4-year degree may give them, a goal to strive for while the first year or two is in a community college.
that is certainly a good possibility, and the data suggests, and this is not the most recent data, it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the last time I saw it, that when community college students were asked what their ultimate educational goal was, over 85% of them said a bachelor's degree, but in reality, less than 17% were able to achieve it, right? So some of the initiatives that we're putting into place, the streamlined pathways, will surely create a more enticing product, if you will, than what has been there in the past. We're eliminating all of the barriers that prevented those dreams from being fulfilled.
Was faculty an issue in terms of the faculty that community colleges have not being able to inspire?
I think, and the faculty in the 4-year institutions as well, one of the main challenges there is around the articulation agreements that would allow a student with an associate's degree from a community college to be admitted to a 4-year college without having to retake a lot of the credits. So in California, that used to be a real problem until the legislature passed SB 1440, which basically forced all of the California State University programs to meet with their community college counterparts and create an ATD, an Associate's in Transfers degree, whereby all of the programs were articulated and students were given a promise that if you graduate from the Orange County Community College with an ATD in business, you're guaranteed admission to the Mihailo Business College at Cal State Fullerton, and you are guaranteed that you will not need more than 60 units to get your bachelor's degree. That is, we're going to fully give you credit for those 60. We have one of the challenges that we're approaching with the Arizona Attainment Alliance here is precisely that. is making sure that we have seamless pathways so the student knows the courses I'm taking here are guaranteed to transfer, and I will be able to meet my four-year degree goal. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that we're doing with the community colleges to address some of those issues.
Thank you, Chair Manson. So President Cruz Rivera, do you have the data of the forecast, because you are working with other 8 community college, and the locations, because some of them will probably come in person and some of them will stay in those locations, so you have an idea of, because behind the scene you're working on that, so you have any data that is, how is that looking with those 8 community colleges? And I know you don't want, if you can mention some, or.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we will have to wait to see. It's kind of hard to estimate that, and we have not done any formal focus groups or surveys on that front beyond the Coconino Community College experiment. But I will say that it was interesting because this year the pilot of universal admissions only gave students one option, which was Coconino Community College. About 2,000 students that have been rejected, from those rejected from NAU, accepted that option. And then, of course, they not all actually show up, right? There's a yield there.
Yeah.
But they were from all over the state because they really wanted to come to NAU. They really wanted to come to Flagstaff. And so they chose Coconino. In fact, about 100 of the 182 new students that Coconino Community College received through this process are using our residence halls, right? So they're from other places across the state. This year, for next fall, what will happen is that the student, instead of getting an invitation to go to Coconino Community College, they'll get an invitation to go to any of 8 community colleges. So they could very well choose to stay home. It's a lower cost option, right? And then transfer to Flagstaff a year or 2 later. And so we will have to see how the economic incentives pan out. Certainly something that we'll be looking at more scientifically moving forward, but we have not done so yet. We're in the process, just give an update to the board. One of the goals around the college network effort that we're discussing here was to get at least one IGA, intergovernmental agreement, from a community college district that was willing to embark in this work. We have 6 right now that have been signed. We expect 3 more to be signed once the respective community college boards approve them. We only have one that has indicated they will not move forward with us. So once we have those IGAs in place, then we will be digging deeper into that kind of question.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to recommend to the board that we award $1.5 million in Regents Opportunity Initiative grant funds to NAU to support the development of a multi-year strategic and operational plan to strengthen Arizona's post-secondary ecosystem, as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion does carry. Thank you.
Thank you.
The remainder of our time today, which is just a little over an hour, is going to be focused on the state of K-12 readiness to produce students prepared for college-level work and our university's various initiatives and programs to improve K-12 outcomes. I asked the committee to take up this discussion essentially because the quality and readiness of the students that we receive in the university system is important in that it relates to the level of support that we have to provide in the college system, the level of remedial teaching and learning that needs to be accomplished in the first years, which can impact some retention and graduation rates. And I think that, K-12 is obviously a large conversation in this state on a regular basis. I think it's important that we understand, as the recipient of these students, how we are helping and how we could possibly further help improve the college readiness of those K-12 students. So to frame this discussion, I've asked Director Arnold to provide the committee with some information, and so I will pass the baton to him.
Thank you. So we just put together a handful of slides that really tracks against the background document that you've all received. Let me scooch up to the microphone. And thank you, Regent Manson, for bringing this conversation forward. I think the board knows that our university is engaged with the K-12 system regularly. We really need to think about it as that old P20 system, that we're part of this broader education system in Arizona. But part of the conversation we want to have today is what is our responsibility and role in improving academic outcomes in the K-12 system. We do a great job recruiting from the K-12 system, bringing kids up, but not only can, we want to talk about how do we improve their college readiness, but how do we get more students to be college ready? So a little background. Suzanne, are you going to be my whoever? Next slide, please. Hey, this year the board gave an assignment to the EEC to work on attainment, and the specific, I'm quoting from part of that assignment, says working with university personnel, including enrollment teams, the EEC will develop and launch a plan to improve Arizona resident post-high school educational attainment outcomes by 10% over 3 years. When giving this assignment, we asked the board, what exactly does that mean? And the board said that's part of your assignment, to go and make sure we know
Define your own goal.
what that means. And so certainly post-high school educational attainment is tied to high school attainment and that K-12 system attainment. So where are we as a state? Next slide, please. So certainly one of the key measures in post-high school attainment is what percentage of our students are going to a 2 or 4 year degree granting institution post-high school. The bottom line, the black line, is Arizona. The top line is national average. There's not a class of 2022 yet for national average. So this is what percentage of high school graduates enroll in a 2 or 4 year degree program within 12 months of graduating from high school. See, at the national level, the numbers run in the 60%. Peaking in 2018 at 69%. You can certainly see the impacts of COVID over the last few years. Arizona has historically run about 15 percentage points below the national average, and that trend has continued. Again, you can see the drop in for the class of 2020, which was our first COVID year. We have not really recovered over the last 2 years from that drop. We will do at the November board meeting, we have a lot of additional data around college going that we will dive into with the board. Just wanted to give you some top line numbers today. Certainly the demographics, the various achievement levels based on gender and other demographics, I think, are really important in this conversation. Next slide, please. So how does our K-12 system do? U.S. News and World Report ranks all of the K-12 systems in the country. We rank 46th, which frankly punches above our funding levels, but we rank 46th. And they break it down: preschool enrollment 46, standardized math at 8th graders 33, reading 30, and high school graduation rates 47th, and then college readiness, which college going is part of that, 45th. Next slide,
Are those
please.
percentiles?
Go back,
or-
please. No, that is ranking out of the states.
Okay.
So 46, I
So
think, out of
30
51
30 is
systems.
better than 46.
So 51 systems, DC is in there, so we're 46 out of 51 overall. Our college readiness, 45th out of 51 overall.
Okay.
Next slide. And so drilling down into that a little bit, into the percentages, so what's happening in our system? So percent of our students that are in a quality early learning program, 46% of our students go to a quality early learning, a preschool. Nationally, that's 53%. Fourth grade proficient reading, 31%. Nationally, it's 34. These are NAEP scores. Percent of eighth grade students proficient in math, 24%, 26 nationally. And I was surprised by that number. I thought it was going to be worse. So we're pretty close to national average on our eighth grade math.
Yeah, but 26 or 24 is still.
It's stunningly bad, I agree, but but we're
You say the positives.
close to national average.
Checking the boxes
Hey.
at random gives you about the same.
ABC, ABC, ABC.
Eighth grade proficient reading, again, 28, 29. High school graduation rates, we graduate at 77%, national average is 87%, and then post-high school enrollment, as we noted, we're at 47, national average is 62.
So if you take those eighth grade proficiency numbers and the difference between Arizona and national average, the difference in those two areas at eighth grade is negligible.
I would
And then
argue,
you see
yes.
a drop to 10% at the high school graduation rate. So we're losing them between eighth and 12th grade.
And in many ways, so I've read through this data, and I've looked at this data a lot across my career, but I've generally compared it to goals that we've set for the state. Honestly, I don't know the last time I sat down and looked at it against national averages. So compared to the national system, we're through eighth grade, it appears we're a B- system. And then our high school is a D system. And so that's what's happening in our high schools, where we're losing students who are generally as prepared as national averages, and yet our high school outcomes are significantly worse. And you saw that in the U.S. News data as well, where our through eighth grade we're ranked in 30, and then our overall system is 45th. One more data point. So this is ACT performance. Again, a high school measure. A little difficult to pull comparisons here. There are 17 states, including Arizona, where more than 80% of the high school students take the ACT. In Arizona, 98% of our students complete the ACT. It's the assessment test of choice now for Arizona. And that 20% can really swing numbers. I agree with that. But just using the 17, ACT is broken down into 4 areas of competency: English, math, reading, and science. We ranked 16 out of the 17 in English, 15 out of the 17 in math, 11th in reading, and 14th in science. You can see the percentage of students meeting the proficiency standard. Utah ranked first out of the 17 in every single category, and you can see the difference between Utah and Arizona. And I'm trying to remember, I don't think Roxanne's here. I can't remember what percentage of students in Utah take the test. I think it was like 85%. So you're probably losing their 15% worse students in that. So take that as with a little bit of a grain of salt, but would still argue we're underperforming in competency in those areas based on the ACT scores. So some of the questions we wanted to tackle today, a base understanding, what are the universities doing to improve K-12 outcomes? And again, want to avoid conversations around what are we doing to recruit students to the universities, but really what are we doing to improve K-12 outcomes? Are we measuring the impacts of any of that engagement, and then what additional steps, if any, should the board and the universities take to improve K-12 outcomes? And certainly underlying those questions is resources. Do we have a responsibility to the state or a responsibility to our own universities to improve our pipeline by expending resources in the K-12 and specifically in the high school systems? And then last slide, what are some of the types of engagement that are out there? And the universities can speak to this much better than I can, but some direct funding of counselors, The Board of Regents funds peer level counselors. So we hire seniors to help students complete their FAFSA degree or their FAFSA applications, for example. I know other universities directly embed counselors into high schools that are funded by the universities. We do curriculum support, academic camps, certainly math camps and other things like that. I think fairly limited in their footprints. Distance teaching, where we provide some online teaching to high schools. ASU runs charter schools. I think both as an experiment and to help identify better ways to teach. ASU has an online K-12 academy. One question I had was around continuing education for K-12 teachers and leadership. One thing we noted in here is just the high level of turnover among principals. And it's been a few years since I've been in this world, but the turnover among superintendents in the state, I believe, is relatively high. When I was working in that arena, the average tenure for a superintendent was 2.5 years. I don't know if that's been 15 years ago, so that may have changed, but I would be surprised if it's changed a lot. And then certainly dual enrollment efforts, which has largely been the space of the community colleges, but there are areas where we could do more on that front. So with that, Madam Chair, that's kind of trying to set the table.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to you. And we have asked the universities to be prepared for this discussion. I don't know if you want people to come up to the table. I see several faces in the audience that are experts on this front, and then several up on the screen that are also prepared to engage in the conversation.
Perfect. I appreciate that. So I'm going to start with a question, and then I would like to ask the board to kick in and bring up other topics as well. But I think I'd be very interested in, the list of things that we engage in as universities in terms of trying to help college readiness in the K-12 system. Do we have data-based evidence on the efficacy of any of those programs? Do we know that what we're doing is making a difference currently? So that's a university question for each of you, and I don't know who at each university wants to answer that. Maybe the provosts?
Sure. I would, this is on.
Should be on.
Hi, speaking.
Is it on? Yeah.
There we go.
It is on.
Okay. So, I would say in some instances, we have good evidence of what's working, and in some we don't, as we've been sort of innovating and trying different things. And I think setting priorities for what it is that we really want to invest in and then starting to evaluate those. I would point to one of the things that you mentioned is our efforts with ASU Prep and ASU Prep Digital, where we have evolving a way to teach very effectively in a variety of communities across Arizona, where we do have really terrific evidence of student success as well as college pathways that come from those efforts. And we do have folks here who can speak at greater length about that work and the evidence that we have to support that. So that the short answer is it depends on what category you're talking about, but we do have good evidence. And I would also say that we have been, in addition to some of the items that you listed, we've been working with our Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College on a new design for education, the next generation education workforce, which is trying to come up with an alternative model for teaching that draws on communities of practice as a way to both prevent the high levels of dropout that we see among teachers who don't stay in schools for very long, and then the way in which that new model can improve student outcomes. And we have some really great evidence in that area as well.
And then I would just corroborate what Nancy just said. that it really depends on the nature of the program. We have a number of programs that are federally funded, and in those cases, those programs have been assessed or evaluated with a programmatic focus, and those assessments do indicate efficacy, and that results in continuing funding for those initiatives. But we have such a wide range of activities across the academic areas, especially, and also in our student affairs areas, that there are some initiatives that don't have that kind of rigorous assessment that demonstrates their efficacy.
Do we have UA?
Yes, yes. I think you just heard two very accurate representations of what happens at the universities. You know, we're very complex organizations and we have different levels of programs. So, for example, many NSF-funded projects, say in the College of Science or the College of Engineering, will have broader impact requirements and outreach requirements as part of them, and those are usually evaluated by outside evaluators when they're engaged in. But one of our challenges, of course, is that many of those great ideas then evaporate once the federal funding goes away. From time to time, some of those projects then, if they've demonstrated their efficacy, are picked up. For example, in the College of Education, we had funding many years ago in a very narrow area of special education, where youngsters who have intellectual disabilities are aged out of the system. They don't graduate high school, but they're aged out when they're 21. And where do they go after that? And we had a project focus that worked in that particular area, and it was so effective and had such a great impact on that small number of students that we managed to find in the university, in collaboration with the local school districts, continuing funding for that. So 15 years later, it's still working. We're still affecting those young people. Now, that's a very narrow, small project, but it's one where, in response to your question about efficacy, it was such a powerful program for those students that we worked really hard to maintain it following that. Other kinds of programs we have, for example, we run a center called the Center for Recruitment and Retention of Math Teachers. That was actually begun by TRIF funding. So thank you very much for the TRIF funding many years ago. And again, that was such a powerful effort that we now have a broad base of collaboration with math teachers right across the state. And that's a professional development program using the categories that Executive Director Arnold put on the board. That, by the way, I think is a very high leverage kind of practice, because if you can improve the performance of teachers and retain teachers in the classroom over longer periods because they're more skilled, then you've got something that you can really, with our small amount of funding, that you can leverage performance in the K-12 system. You know, our K-12 system spends upwards of $11 billion a year. So asking us at the universities with our paltry revenues to leverage a system that has that much money into it, what the added value that we can bring to that has to be very sharply focused if we're going to deliberately invest resources into those kinds of programs. So I think we'd have to think very deeply about how to focus that effort. And, you know, maybe this is a system-wide effort that across the 3 universities to try to figure out which foci would be the most powerful ones, and ones where we can leverage a knowable outcome. I think that really is the trick for us at the universities in engaging K-12.
Yeah, so, and I appreciate all that. That's the base level of what I was looking for. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you know, ASU obviously has ASU Prep, which is, you know, a very definitive answer to how do you create college readiness? You create your own K-12.
It's called the end run strategy.
So that obviously you've had great success with, but not everybody has the capacity to, you know, stand up a charter school within their realm of operations. Outside of that, I guess what I'm looking for from the universities is, what do you view as your most, perhaps top 3 impactful programs to improving student college readiness?
I have a comment.
Sure,
Yes.
I would just,
In terms of that question you asked, if you look at the various foundations like the Gates Foundation as an example, they've thrown an enormous amount of money at this problem and tried all kinds of experiments. And one thing that they know works, and works really well, is a highly motivated and qualified teacher.
Yes.
And similarly, an effective principal who makes sure that there are highly qualified and effective teachers. And that, frankly, doesn't take that much money. What it takes is discipline on the part of the school system to make that happen. And that's the biggest challenge, as I understand it, in K-12. But to me, that learning, which is across many organizations, should be right at the heart of any attempt to improve things, since we know that that is a highly leverageable asset if we can achieve it. So to me, I'm always surprised at the state's willingness to throw money at K through 12 and not care. And that's how you
Care about the outcomes?
yeah, and that's what you would probably have to assume, looking at the amount of money that Ron cites and the paltry results. And what amazes me about the chart is the graduation rate. How could you graduate that many people who are incompetent? I know how. You don't care. So it's, to me, these are the core issues that any program, like the Arizona special program, which is a charter school basically, is a good effort, but we know charter schools work. And what no one has cracked is, how do you get into this K through 12 public supported beast to get at the core issue of teachers?
Regent Putnam?
You know, Chair Menson, I know you're trying to get the provost to answer your question.
No, this is
But-
fine. I mean, this is kind of the point of this, so.
But to Regent Herbold's point, all of the research shows that principals who are good leaders end up retaining teachers longer, and they also end up with really a better workforce among the teachers. So it strikes me that one area to ask the provosts about is really what they're doing to really raise the quality of their training programs, which are principally master's level training programs, with some doctorate programs in educational administration. And what changes ought we to be demanding there as a board that really focus increasingly on leadership skills for those principals, recognizing that they're embedded in a system with limited degrees of capacity to manage and lead, but nonetheless a responsibility on our part to educate and train them to be good leaders. The other piece of this that strikes me, and I'll go to Provost Gonzalez's point a little earlier, where she talked about really looking at their own curriculum, whether indeed as a board we should be looking specifically to the high school teachers, and whether indeed our curriculum at this point is really meeting the needs with some sort of assessment of the efficacy of those teacher training programs at the high school level, in order to determine whether we can bring about some changes. And actually, we can't do it as a board, but the provost can. And that's why I was appreciative of what Provost Gonzalez said, that ASU was actually looking at an area that I think is really important. With that, I'll stop talking and let you ask the questions.
So going back to, okay. Going back to the original question, as I recollected at this point, just basically building on all the comments that have been made, which point to the fundamental importance of the quality of the teacher candidates that we graduate and school leaders, I would put those programs that NAU offers at the top of our list. And of course, in addition to our degree programs for secondary level teachers and primary level teachers, as well as for school leaders and school professionals. And we do have a sizable doctoral program in educational leadership that addresses the issues that Regent Penley just mentioned. We also have our K through 12 center, which offers ongoing professional development support for teachers across Arizona. And then our Gear Up program, which is a federally funded program that works with on the order of about 20,000 students a year directly at different levels around academic preparation, college readiness, and career planning.
And I'll also speak to, I think some of our biggest assets are, one, we've been very actively engaged in rethinking how you teach math. And we will be, soon, we will have new math curriculum that makes use of adaptive learning that can be used at the high school level that is going to prepare students to learn math in the early grades, but also to continue on through the college curriculum, which is just critical if you look at the way in which math plays a big role in college readiness. I would say also that you've got to think about college readiness and preparedness as a community and family matter. It's not just individual students, and we have significant assets. Jim Rund and the Educational Outreach and Student Services through Access Arizona and the ways in which they partner deeply with communities and families to help them understand what's required for students to remain motivated and engaged and provide a wealth of services to families, schools, and communities. I think we also, our innovations around teacher training and leadership and academic leadership training through the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. We've been innovating new models there that I think are outstanding and are going to, and have great potential. So I would definitely put those on our list. And then I also think that if you think about all the ways in which, there's a variety of students who have many, many needs. We continue to develop assets, and I would say that ASU Prep has played a big role in this, in understanding assets that could be delivered not just to students in the charter schools, but to students across high schools, where they can take advantage of courses depending on their interests and their ability level to make sure our really high-performing students, for example, are getting extra benefits and access to courses to make them college-ready if their own schools and communities aren't quite prepared to do so. So I think those are some of our most promising, among many other things. We are involved in training of counselors and placing counselors in the schools, and that's an area we're planning to expand. I think there's a definite need there as well, but there's a long list, but I'll just list those as what I think are some of our most promising. Thank you.
Some of this has already been said, but just to provide a structure to at least the way we're thinking about this at NAU more generally. So there's a lot of things that we control, and that we have to make sure that we are doing the best we can to contribute to K-12 performance and attainment. And clearly that's the teachers we produce and the higher ed K-12 administrators that we produce. Are they well prepared to meet the challenge that they will face when they get out into the field? And are we providing them the professional development needed so that they can navigate their careers in concert with the ever-increasing challenges facing K-12 education, not only in Arizona, but across the country? But that's what we control, right? What we don't control is, once they're there, how does that environment, that bureaucracy, that support system, the resources that are available, how do they contribute to the motivation of the teachers and the leaders? And it is a staggering amount of dollars in absolute numbers when we think about their budget, but on a per-student basis, we're among the lowest in the country. So the degrees of freedom that these great educators and leaders that our universities are producing and putting in the field, and the programs that we're trying to support, the degrees of freedom they have are less than what others across the country have. And that we don't control directly. And salaries, the number of vacancies, the number of teachers that are placed in classrooms to teach a subject for which they're not necessarily certified in, all of those things contribute to the numbers that we're seeing there. And then, of course, is the reality, and I think President Robbins talked about this at the last meeting, that we have a totally broken system as it pertains to early childhood education and childcare in Arizona. It's a mess. I'll just say that. And we know from cognitive studies that between years 3 and 5, that pretty much sets up a student in a trajectory. And so we don't have control over that. Now, I do think that perhaps one way that we could all come together to address this is by trying to exert some influence over those issues. We are investing a significant amount in creating the teachers and the leaders. What are we getting in return, right? Just some food for thought.
President Robbins?
I would just agree with the point on early childhood education, or early childhood development, to be clear about it. It's politically polarizing. I understand that. It is in almost every place, but I think Jose Luis is correct that if we're playing the long game, that's where we need to focus. We have 5.5 pages of programs that we can leave with you. Ron and Casey can talk about a few, and John, you gave a disclaimer on, are these recruiting students, or are they trying to improve the achievement and attainment in the high schools? I think a lot of these programs are doing just that. Some of my favorites, and I've talked about this many times, is our College Academy for Parents. That's going from grade school to middle school, engaging with them. I think it's really important because, as you see, we're losing from 8th grade to grade 12. There are many other programs that are here. The KEYS program is more high-end focused, where we allow students to come in to Bio5 and spend a summer in an internship. Those are really good programs, but they're more geared to those who are already accomplished. I think we need to focus on the front end, or with early childhood development, and trying to, at that critical junction between grade school and middle school, have programs like College Academy for Parents and Students. It's one of my favorite times because the students come and they're graduating from grade school, going to middle school, and we have a picture and we engage with the parents. And I think all those things are important. With regard to putting counselors in and things like that, those are really important things that we're doing, and Casey has been a real champion for that. Ron is probably the best expert in the room on this, and when he was dean of our College of Education, one of the things that I think was really helpful was the dean met with the Southern Arizona superintendents of school districts. And that fell off for a while, and then during my tenure with Bruce Johnson as the dean, we started that back. But having conversations, providing teachers and administrators the ability to continue their professional development is really important. But you have to know the people, you have to have a dialogue, there has to be a trust. And so I think those are some really important things as well.
Let
The expert in the room.
Marks have his share of the conversation.
If I could just respond to that, you can't imagine the dean of a business school who isn't heavily involved in business and industries within their domain, in their region. And the same thing is true with leadership and education at universities. And so, as President Robbins said, we had regular meetings throughout all my 14 years as Dean of Education with superintendents and their leadership group. But in addition to this, there are other kinds of indirect things that could happen. Many of you remember Ron Schupman as a member of the board. Ron and I were instrumental in creating Tucson Values Teachers, which tries to get at the issues having to do with sustaining the teaching force in a community, because the loss of teachers is really a fundamental problem in the country. There are impressive data that show that it takes 4 or 5 years for a teacher to reach kind of plateau of effect on student learning as measured by tests, the data that were thrown up there. If we lose 40 to 45% of our teachers before that 5-year period, and we do in this state, then we are forever trying to train new teachers on the job. And we can do a fine job at the university in preparing well-started beginners as teachers, and that's what they are. All of you started in professions. The very first job you had in that profession, like me when I was a university teacher, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It took me a couple years to get my feet under me. All of you had that experience. If we lose the teachers, once they get their feet under them, they know what they're doing, then we have to start all over again. So what Ron and I tried to do with Tucson Values Teachers, which continues as an organization in our region, is to build kind of a political and public understanding of the importance of teachers as a fundamental component of a vibrant community. Have we succeeded? Well, only partially. But that's another thing that we at universities can do, is to use the considerable cachet that we have as intellectual leaders in our communities to help our communities understand the importance of teaching and school leadership to address the issues that Regent Penley spoke to.
And I would just say we try to recognize at big public forums like football games and basketball games, teacher of the game, teacher of the year, and across the function of the university we try to do that. But it's a big problem. I would say we're not doing very well with what we're doing right now because the data says we're not.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that as well. I do think the way we're teaching teachers and our expectations for what a brand new teacher needs to be able to do when they get out to the classroom. They're expected to be able to take care of all of the students' needs, teach every subject. And so we've really been focused on a rethink of what that model is. And I would invite you to have us, we can give you some documentation of some of the work that we've been doing on what the next generation of teacher education should be, so that we deal with these problems of teacher turnover and better prepare our teachers to stay in for the long run and to meet the needs of our students. I also want to say we also have a long list of programs that we think, bear scaling, because we have good evidence that they're working. Like we have a program, our WeGrad program, that kind of works with that pipeline of students, bringing them from the middle school on up to high school and make sure that they're college prepared and college ready. And I also just want to say that I think that we've probably been much more focused on that part of the pipeline and less so on early childhood education. But I think that another resource, and I do think partnership is going to be so critical as we think about doing this. I think another resource we should be mindful of is the ASU Helios decision theater and the way in which, and that's a statewide asset, and the way in which they can bring data to the table and visualize data and help understand the points at which we are experiencing losses and gaps, and so that can help guide our decisions about where we need to invest our focus and investments.
Any comments, questions from the board? Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking questions.
Might I jump in and just add to what was said earlier? And I think a couple of people mentioned the community or ecological dimensions of the issue, and I think that's part of the reason that we see the poorer performance for Arizona relative to other states. And then, to Provost Gonzalez's suggestion that we figure out how to collaborate and where to target our efforts. I think our efforts clearly need to be targeted at communities that are lower income, rural, and where there's a prevalence of historically underrepresented students. That's where we see the greatest challenges.
John, do we have data on high school graduation rates by income level, by zip code?
By zip code, they've got it.
Yeah,
Decision theater.
you name it, we got it.
You name it, we got it?
We can break down high school graduation rates in almost every demographic, region, by high school, by economic level. It's certainly all there.
I mean, we're in an unusual situation in that we have and I'm really sad that Superintendent Horn isn't here for this discussion today. I mean, this would have been a phenomenal opportunity, and that's what I was kind of hoping for. How much coordination, interaction, cooperation do we have between the university system, and the K-12 leadership? Do we, for the first few years I was on the board, we didn't have the superintendent at the meetings. When the last few years we did, and then, Superintendent Horn has been here for the first few meetings of his term, and I would expect that, I'm assuming that will continue, but I'm curious, what kind of ability or opportunity do we have as the university system with our decision theater, with our data analytic capacity, to have conversations, provide data or solution sets to the K-12 system?
I think this discussion locally with the superintendents and the leadership of all the school districts is really, really important. And I think that listening to them, asking them, how can we help? What can we do to help you? And have these relationships and keep the dialogue close. And, Casey has done a great job of putting counselors. That's one thing that Sunnyside said, we really need your help there. This is, now I'm going to go a little bit away from where Ron and I may disagree. There's another controversy around, Teach for America, having the students go in and teach for a couple of years and leave. And, he's brought me around on this issue somewhat. But I think when I go to Raytheon and ask, what can we do for you? Give us more engineers. I think when we go to the school systems, what can we do for you? Get us better teachers. And I think that's probably our highest and best use of our time.
But I guess my question is, if we provide them with better teachers, but we're putting them into an unsustainable environment where they're expected to be, the be-all and end-all for every student. You're their parent, you're their friend, you're their teacher, you're their disciplinarian. I don't know. We can give them highly trained and qualified and dedicated teachers, but how long can you sustain that kind of environment as a workplace? And so I may be speaking out of turn because I haven't had a kid in the K-12 system for, I don't know, a lot of years now. I'm not going to do the math. But from what I hear anecdotally, that's the issue, is that I get into this classroom and so much is expected of me that it takes all of my energy, all of my capacity, and I can't sustain that forever. So how do we help? Is there a way for us to help change that environment?
No.
No, okay.
So I'd like to go to, seriously, going to President Cruz-Rivera's comments, I mean, what can we control and what can we leverage with the amount of investment and the amount of energy we have to do that work? So we've got, for the last 20 minutes, talking about personnel kinds of issues. Regent Herbold brought us to that point, and I think that's a really good point for us to focus on. And also to focus on the localized relationships. You have 3 really fabulous universities in this state. They're located in the 3 regions, North, South, Central, and building close relationships with the local education agencies, charter schools, public districts, and so on, and having sort of person-to-person and institution-to-institutional relationships, I think, is a more powerful way of doing it than trying to think about orchestrating a statewide system. I don't think the regions want to go take over the K-12 world. That would be a big mistake, obviously. So we can focus on what we can do. The data on teacher and principal retention they stay in the field. By the way, the job is a great job. It's a terrific job, and most teachers like the work that they do with the students in their classrooms. The two reasons they leave: administrator support and central support, as Regent Herbold pointed out. And the other one is policy related, which is not our world. We're not involved in K-12 policy. And the third one is salary. So salary is a little bit more amenable. We've done some great work in the state on salaries, but we're still behind. But those are the three reasons why we lose educators. And only a little bit can we leverage that kind of system. So I think, as President Robbins said, the way forward for me would be to build those relationships with local organizations. We go to Sunnyside, and we have a Sunnyside High School. We have a ceremony at the beginning of the year with all the students from Sunnyside High School that we admitted to our university. We have a special relationship with that school system. We have counselors there focusing on the broad range of students, including Indigenous students who are there. We've increased our enrollment from that school tremendously, and that's exactly the students who we need to serve that we haven't in the past served well. So we can do that because we get in the car and drive 20 minutes and we're in that high school. So I think that's why I think that the local relationships are the strongest.
And I'm happy to add on a little bit to that, just to give you the full picture, where I feel like this really is what can make a difference. It's modeled after the National Advising Corps. We used to be in 5 schools around this the local Tucson community. And as the funding went away for that, we weren't able to do that anymore, but the schools really felt it. And Sunnyside came to us and said, our numbers are going down, they're not going to college the same rate, so we want you here. And so we have funded one full-time person that's in the school, both schools. They have 2 high schools, both Desert View and Sunnyside. So we have a person that is in those schools, as well as one other full-time person that Sunnyside funds half of, and the U of A funds the other half. And that half that's at U of A is funded by my office and the College of Education. And so but 2 full people that are working there and working directly with students, really able to focus on even middle school, 9th and 10th graders, and not just focus on the recruitment piece, but on what courses need to be taken, how you need to prepare yourself. The program comes with a number of opportunities to come to campus. Many of those students, even though living in Tucson, have never been on campus, potentially maybe for a sporting event, but that's it. And so we focus and work with the administration there, knowing areas of interest, and the areas of interest that they had were particularly around STEM, so things that they do on our campus relate to that. So a number of just events, programs, and things, which definitely starts with the College Academy for Parents that President Robbins spoke about earlier, as students as young as 2nd and 3rd grade are in courses learning about college, but at that time, their parents who did not go to college are really learning about college and how to support their kids as they go through their system to become hopefully a college student one day. And so the students get to see their parents wear their cap and gown, and they graduate from the College Academy for Parents, and then it helps them to move through. So we do have some data on that I don't have all with me today, but as those students are going through all those pieces, we're seeing great increases in the number of students that are coming to us from both Desert View and Sunnyside. Sunnyside alone, just in the last 2 years, a 58% increase in the number of students that enrolled, and for Desert View, 28%. And so those numbers, I know it's not all about the recruitment piece, but we believe that having that awareness and that engagement early on, and really have those dedicated people that are working with the students and their families, because they're also doing a lot of night events, helping families understand what is a FAFSA, what does that mean as early as 8th and 9th grade, so that they are preparing for these kinds of things as they move forward. And just one final note I'll say, and stop talking, is that just in the last week, we learned from the Sunnyside District that of all of their seniors, there were only 21 that had not applied to our institution that were eligible students. And I know eligible is that key word there because we're working on so much of that to help our students be successful and be ready, college ready. But 21 students had not applied of all of their seniors to both at both high schools. So it was pretty exciting. And we are seeing increases in their retention as well. And so I think that's the other important part is that we're looking at this as a full continuum and helping to make sure that the students not only get to us or one of our other institutions in the state, but that they're graduating.
Thank you, Casey and Provost. Just the Sunnyside story is really extraordinary. Some 15 plus years ago, I was the director of the School Facilities Board, and we built new educational space based on growth. And Sunnyside asked me to come down and look at their high school, and they applied for additional space because they believed they were going to grow through increasing their retention rates. And the state, we said no, we can't fund that, and their dropout rates at the time were in the 50s. And I'm like, you have to demonstrate that you're going to improve your retention rates before we can come in and build space, which they have done. So, but just follow-up question: what are the resource levels, if I can ask, that a program like Sunnyside takes from the university to really implement and have that level of success? And in terms of scalability to other districts or schools, is that really possible?
Well, can I jump in and ask? I guess one thing I'd want to describe that approach is a very effective approach, and it's something that's done to scale through our Gear Up program, which is a federally funded program. And as I mentioned earlier, it has impact on about 20,000 students a year. And it works directly with 50 schools across the state, a large number of educators, and it has direct engagement with families and educators at the middle through the high school levels around some of the same kinds of endeavors that Casey was just describing. So that might be an example of one way to scale up, and if there was an interest, it might be worthwhile for the board to see a showcase of what is going on in the Gear Up program. And also our Arizona K through 12 Center, which, NAU is formerly the normal school of the state, so we have a lot of stuff going on in this area. And that is, along the lines of creating relationships with superintendents. And in our case, it's not just in our region. It's located in Phoenix. It works across the state, engaging with school leaders and with teachers around issues of building leadership capacity and professional development. So those are two examples where there might be some opportunity to learn about how to scale up. And both of those are grant-funded operations.
If I could just jump in once. Also, the point about the localized effort, I think, is so important because it takes the local leadership, and we have such a decentralized system that's actually where all the action occurs. And we have tremendous partnerships with particular districts, and there we're really seeing great outcomes. But I wanted to, Jim Rund and his team have been so involved in the community partnership piece of this. I want to invite Jim if you want to make some comments about that.
I see also Amy has her hand up, and maybe if we
okay.
Go to her.
Let's have. Okay, Amy.
Hi there, thank you. Amy McGrath, and I'm the Managing Director of our ASU Prep Schools, network of charter schools, as we've mentioned. But outside of our state-funded work, we're building new models that we can deploy in partnership with local communities and school districts, of which we have 180 of current college-going labs and partnerships around the state, and we're realizing some pretty powerful impact. And we're currently at the end of 2 3-year grants that I'll just mention, where we've affected quite a bit of change specific to what Executive Director Arnold put up on the math front. We are starting at the mouth of the beast in 8th grade and deploying high-dose tutoring to 6,000 students around the state. This is our 3rd year, and I'm happy to report that 88% of rural students have improved their math proficiency, and 93% of urban students have improved their math proficiency. Again, that is a grant that's ending. We've also deployed in partnership with Helios, the governor's office, and the department, an Arizona Virtual Teacher Institute to 20,000 public school teachers, where we have hours of training on how these teachers can hone their craft and what this new frontier of education looks like, potentially with digital assets, et cetera. It's in direct partnership with schools, and it is contextual to what tools these schools and these communities are using. And 97% of the 20,000 teachers have reported that this has increased their job satisfaction to have access to these types of high quality professional development tools. So I'm poised to continue to do more, continuing to develop assets that we'd love to bring and make available to districts and help to train them to implement them as well.
Thank you for that, Amy. I don't think this is on.
They're going to adjust it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for that, Amy. We have, as she notes, a partnership with over 200 schools around the state of Arizona. And so ASU Prep is not just an effort to build a pipeline of Arizona students in our schools into the university. We're endeavoring to work collaboratively with teachers, with school administrators, with not-for-profit organization, with the superintendent's office and the like, to improve outcomes for all. We have a myriad of efforts. I know all three universities do that involve schools at virtually every level, and that is complex and significant work. I think we are making strides. The state indeed is improving, as you saw in third grade reading and eighth grade math. Aspiration and opportunity and access to that matters. And here I just like to compliment the board on its advancement of the Arizona Promise. And also, President Crow's not here, but echoing his mantra for the last several years regarding state investment. You know, asking the state to invest in its students is a sure path forward. And as evidence of that, I think we handed out some background on a scholarship program that we stood up over 10 years ago. You will see that the neediest of needy Arizonans, students in households of under $25,000 in family income, are outperforming the all-student average in persistence and graduation rates for a decade. That is evidence-based data that underscores how important a commitment from the state like Promise is, because it levels the playing field regarding resourcefulness, and it demonstrates that we have brilliance in every household in Arizona just waiting for an opportunity.
Thank you, Jim. I want to go back to John's question about the level of resources required to expand upon the law first, you know, and I think definitively if you talk about the specifics of that Sunny Slope, Sunnyside, what does it cost us to do that per school?
Casey, could you respond?
Well, right now we have it's mostly in personnel. And I can add up all the costs. I don't have them in all my head, but I know we with the personnel costs of admissions counselor, and then the other half of the cost. I mean, we'll be looking like at 100,000 for just that portion of it. Of course, the busing, the getting students to your campus, being able to feed them while they're there, all of those things really add up, especially if you're doing it from middle school all the way up. But we can provide a breakdown of what all of the costs ended up being for us for the last couple of years as we've been implementing and putting this through and perfecting it, really adding different elements that we believe are much more effective, and give you an idea of what the yearly cost is. But I think we can't only look at just that portion of the program, because I think there's a lot of other pieces that go with it. I mean, I mentioned CAP, I mentioned, you know, the road trip programs, in a previous meeting, though, as we are bringing students to the campus, we also have an Algebra Academy and a Launch Academy and different things that are happening for those students at different times of their upbringing. So we will put it all together for you, and then we can have an idea of just kind of what the basics look like for moving forward.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I would just note that for ASU Prep, as it relates to college-going assets and math assets to deploy, it's about $700 a student to be able to bring those assets to the school to be able to implement there on the ground.
Okay, so if, I don't know what those numbers come out to be, but if I just ballpark, you know, your personnel cost is 100,000 plus, let's just double it for the additional, you know, expenses associated with ancillary travel, that kind of thing. That's $200,000, and that's 2 schools, correct?
Correct. The district has 2 high schools.
Okay, so call it $100,000 per school. How many schools do we have, and how many high schools do we have in the state? Okay, so it's real money. So, you know, it basically comes back down to, as many of our conversations do, resources and their deployment and priorities. What is the, if we take the $11 billion of the K-12 budget, what is that per student? Do we know?
About 10 grand. There's a 1.1 million students.
Okay.
Roughly.
Okay, so 7% of that is what it would cost to put those programs in every high school.
You do math in your head way better than I do.
You know, I mean, I'm literally spitballing numbers here just to try and get a sense of what the investment could be.
And I think a case study like Sunnyside and then, you know, ASU's approach is radically different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then looking at Gear Up and what they end up spending per student, I think we can do some homework around that to get a better sense of what the various programs cost and also what they accomplish.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be useful, just to kind of see where do we have options, or where do we ask the K-12 system to pony up to be most effective? Regent Herbold?
One of the things that I know that a lot of the foundations have found out is that when you run an experiment like Sunnyside, it isn't just dollars that it will cost you to scale it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's the human resources that you've put around it. I mean, the thing that you got to be struck by here is that you have a vested interest in making this successful because you get some students who you have groomed their teachers so that they become, you know, real proponents of going to UA. So you have to not only have dollars, you have to have Ron, or the equivalent of that human resource aspect that actually turns out to be even harder
Right.
to scale up than the money.
Yeah.
Even though the money is usually causes the thing to collapse immediately.
Well, and is it as effective if it's a broad university program versus one that's geared towards U of A in its next door neighbor school? Is, you know, so, I mean, there's a lot of pieces.
The way, you know, living in Singapore for 3.5 years, I learned I learned a lot about their K through 12 system because it is so vastly different from the U.S. And the thing that they do is reward teachers. And they don't put as much money against education as you would think. But what they do is they have a reward structure that is unbelievable. First of all, you don't get into a teacher's college without being top quartile of your ACT. You just don't get in. And you might say, well, that must, you know, really starve you for candidates. It turns out that when you pay people appropriately and treat them with the right kind of stature, it really works. So they get a lot of candidates, more than they can take. Then they put them in a structure where if in fact they make it through the 4 years of the schooling, then when they get out, the pay structure for the incoming teachers, new teachers, matches industry, okay? And they set it that way. So this is their public system matching industry. And then comes the performance appraisals, which every year about 25% of teachers are fired. And they know that, and they don't use that kind of coarse language. They just help them find a better match for their career, okay? But what you end up with is the remaining teachers paid, handsomely, but they're all striving for one thing, and that is a master teacher label, which can occur as soon as 6 to 7 years of being a teacher. And the pay scale for a master teacher is really robust. And so they don't have a lot of teachers, but they have great teachers. And being a teacher in Singapore is a very prestigious reputation and lifestyle for those people. So there's a lot of intangibles that need to work to make a teacher motivated. Dollars are certainly important, but prestige and esteem and respect are key. I had to do got stuck with doing a K through 12 study when I was part of the President's Council of Advisors in the early 2000s. And one thing that really struck me about the findings there was just how important this teacher component really is, and how we had to work closely with the teachers union, which controls the Department of Education very strongly. And it was a hideous task to go through. So we have a lot of bureaucracy to work through to even implement the tests. But I know one thing, getting that teacher highly motivated has huge leverage, and all the experiments demonstrate that, or at least having people responsible for this who really care and want to make it successful. That's what you demonstrated with this experiment down in Tucson, and hats off to you because you've taken advantage of it appropriately. But scaling that, big issue. So,
Well, and
but if
that turns the U.S. teacher pay system on its head.
Yeah.
Which is.
But if you focus on that teacher, and I think anything that we push ought to be around the quality of teaching and teachers and prestige for teachers, and getting them to be appreciated go a long way. So
I think that's a great place to end this discussion. And I think it's very, very true. I think we can probably all identify a very, very highly qualified, highly interested teacher in our backgrounds that helped change our direction or solidify our direction. And so every single one of us probably has a story about that teacher and why they were important.
that's right.
It would be nice if everybody had multiples of those. So this is, John, I would like to kind of see some data on the numbers and efficacy if we have it. So this concludes our Strategic Initiatives and Planning Committee meeting, and we are adjourned.